This week's guest on Times Talk is Chris Moon. Chris is a motivational speaker. Chris in the past used to clear landmines before a very bad accident. And even before that, he was a prisoner of the Khmer Rouge. Chris, you were kidnapped in Cambodia under the Khmer Rouge, one of the most vicious regimes that ever existed. What goes through your mind when something like this happens?
I'd left the British Army. I was working for a charity as a volunteer clearing landmines, and we were returning from a village site where we had our guaranteed security from the United Nations soldiers there, and unfortunately something happened. It wasn't possible to predict. We were attacked by Khmer Rouge guerrillas. We were taken prisoner. It was a terrifying experience. I was taken with two of my Cambodian colleagues. I was accused of being a foreign military advisor to the government and told I was a Khmer Rouge prisoner of war. And then I was taken back into the jungle during a day and a half's journey. And the further we went back into their territory, the more likely we knew we were to be killed. And fortunately, I managed to form a relationship with the commander that meant that I was able to change the way they felt about us.
How do you do that? I mean, do you just talk to them? I mean, you had guns pointing in your direction.
It was a tremendously extreme experience because there were 7 times when they were talking about killing us. On each occasion it was possible to change the way they felt because I made a decision when I was first taken prisoner to never assume the role of victim, to not think like a victim, to not feel like a victim, because I knew that would trigger an aggressive response in my captors. But at the same time you could never challenge them in an aggressive way because that meant they would kill you. And of course their prisoner handling system was completely different to anything that I knew of in the British Army. Their job, as they saw it, was to interrogate, torture and execute. Unfortunately, we were able to persuade them not to do that. But it was about establishing a relationship on each of those 7 occasions. The solution was slightly different. And in one case, it was as simple as moving out of the killing ground. But ultimately, it was about establishing a relationship with the commander in which it was possible for him to recognize the good in me that he saw in himself.
What goes through your mind, though, when you must have spent hours alone in darkness?
The first thing that goes through your mind is, how could this have happened? It's only my 2nd day in the minefield. Why me? But ultimately, you have to control all your negativity and focus on what you are going to do to survive. And choosing the way we think is the starting point, not giving in to the fear. They had an interesting tactic. After the first few hours, they kept saying to you, oh, we will release you in a few moments. And at first you believed it. And then as time went on and the day went on, you became hopeless and you knew that it wasn't true. And they did it deliberately to take all of your hope away, to make you easy to handle. The battle was to retain inner hope and not give in to the badness.
And you were one of the few to walk out.
Well, sadly after me, there were another 12 Westerners taken prisoner and they were all executed. We were incredibly fortunate. I was lucky that I found a commander who was a good guy, as I saw it. And of course, it was not about thinking how we think in a Western sense at all. It was about understanding their values. They had very strong values. We might not agree with them, but it was about recognizing everything is the way we choose to make people feel. People will not remember what we say to them, but they will always remember how we make them feel.
You were eventually released. You went to Mozambique. You were involved in removing landmines. And one fine day, you stepped on one.
Yes. I was doing the least dangerous thing I ever did. I still remember it in the present tense, although it was more than 20 years ago. I was walking back up a safe lane. I was running a very big program in the north of Mozambique, East Africa. And there was one landmine that it wasn't possible for the deminers to locate for all sorts of complex and technical reasons. But look, I always said if my blokes missed a mine, I wanted to be the first to know about it, so I've never complained. In no way am I a victim because I chose to clear landmines. I chose to go into that minefield. My sympathy is with the people, the ordinary people, the women, the children, the farmers who had no choice. For me, it's not a sacrifice, but we have to take responsibility for our decisions in life or our lack of decisions. I choose to be thankful for what I have. I lived against all the odds.
Surely, but when you stepped over that landmine and you were, you probably saw your life being blown apart.
I think
Talk us through it.
The interesting thing, and I still remember it in the present tense, because I choose to, I didn't lose consciousness. It took me about 16 hours to get out of that part of East Africa down to a hospital in South Africa. So what I remember is the sheer shock of the blast. The strangest thing of all, a few moments before it happened, I felt as if something vile and evil was coming towards me. 3 seconds, 3 paces, bang, I was blown up. And I knew something terrible had happened. So the first thing is to stay calm. Just to say, right, okay, I've got to be realistic here. 99 times out of 100, it will not be as bad as it could be. So let us start by working out what the worst case scenario is.
Yeah, but you were in the worst case scenario. You lost an arm and a leg.
And now I wasn't in the worst case scenario because I still had an arm and leg left. You've got to focus on what you have, not what you've lost. What happened was I thought, right, the worst case scenario is both arms blown off, both legs blown off. I will be a torso taking my last breath. I looked down, my left arm was still there, a bit burned, left leg burned, but still there. Lower right leg completely blown off, right hand, an indescribable mess. But already, this is not as bad as it could be, not by a long, long way. Still got my left arm, my left leg, and then I have to think about how I am going to live, because I know the battle is for belief. I'm in a very remote part of East Africa. I was operating alone, I was doing an investigation, my medical backup team were on the road. So I shouted my status to them, and then I waited for them to come in. I did the secondary injury check, and then I knew I had to make myself believe that I would live. And throughout the rest of that day, the battle was to make myself believe, to take ownership for my life. And I fought for every breath I had for 16 hours. Unknown to me, I treated, firstly, before I got to this hospital, I treated myself, which was why I survived. And then when I got there, I was taken into the operating theatre. And this was the bit that I didn't know about. The surgeon said on the telephone to the office of the charity that I worked for in London, look, really sorry, I don't think this guy's going to make it. He's lost so much blood. But lucky for me, my friend, the Belgian doctor there, stayed with me on the aircraft and helped me stay breathing. And 16 hours later, I was managing to cling to life. And I still remember it all, fading in and out. I don't believe death is the end. I believe that what goes around comes around, and perhaps we should spread a little kindness and sunshine in life, because it will be repaid back it will be reflected back in far greater quantity.
Do you believe this positive attitude is what made you last throughout this ordeal?
Do I believe a positive attitude helped me stay alive? Oh yes, we choose our attitude. It does not matter what happens to us. It is how we choose to respond to it. But at the same time, the starting point has to be realism. I knew that I had to make myself believe that I would live, and I have a passionate belief that life is about making the best of it. Life is truly a gift that we should not take for granted. We all have so much we take for granted.
You need a sense of humour to go through this.
A sense of humour is essential, particularly in recovery. You've got to be able to laugh at yourself. I mean, I checked that I still had my manhood after I was blown up, and I was relieved.
Your life until then was all about, being fit, athletic, and all that.
Yeah, I started life farming. Being physically strong was immensely important to me, being fit. I'd never had to ask anybody to do anything for me, ever. And then here I was. The surgeon said he'd never seen anybody live with such a small amount of blood. He could not understand how I lived. And, partly the grace of God, partly because I chose to not give up, and partly because I fought for every single breath. And I made myself believe that.
And you went back, and you recovered.
Yes.
You got your prosthetics.
Yes.
And you started going on marathons again.
Oh yeah, I was told it would take 6 months for me to be able to leave Africa to heal, but I was there for 3.5 weeks because I worked really hard at getting better. I focused on the positives. I had a sense of humour, and I worked with the wonderful people, the doctors and nurses there, trying to help me get better. It's all a team effort. And then my dream was to do my first London Marathon less than a year after leaving hospital in 1996. I was told then someone like you couldn't do it that quickly at all. But the biggest limits in life are not out here. It is what goes on in here. So I'm pleased to say I got round the London Marathon. I had reasons more important than me to do it. Whatever we do, find your reasons. And then I became, I'm told, the world's first amputee ultra-distance runner in 1997 when I did the Marathon des Sables.
You're today a very established keynote speaker.
Mm-hmm.
How do you transpose this positive attitude, against all odds, to say somebody working in sales?
Okay, there are 3 angles to what I do. I've got stacks of experience on the limit of human endurance, and I've taken lots of people to bicycle the length of countries, to climb mountains, to do marathons that they did not believe they can do. And what's useful about these experiences on the limit of human endurance and on the balance of life and death is the wisdom and the principles are very clear. And all the pretense we might have as human beings is stripped away, and you're left with the raw wisdom and principles if you choose to take them and use them. Second angle is I did my master's in human behaviour, and I've read hundreds of books on the psychology of achievement, and we're constantly learning and knowing more and more about that. So there's academic rigour to these principles that I share, and I've been doing it for nearly 20 years, so I have a great privilege of sharing my experiences with very different nationalities, organisations, businesses and individuals around the world, and there's an element of shared learning from that. So absolutely, I help people do what they do better, but how we do that and how people use principles is their own decision. There may be an element of short-term pain for long-term gain. In the short term, we may have to sacrifice something. For example, it hurt me when I went running for the first 6 months. And I only had 3 weeks in which I could do distance training. As soon as I crossed that marathon finish line, all that pain was worth it.
What's your next big challenge?
I've got lots of challenges in every area of life. I'd like to plant some trees. I'd like to run a little bit faster this year. I'd like to climb some mountains. I'd like to help some other people achieve their challenges. And there is so much to do, but I also think it's immensely important to take time to be thankful. And I spent some time working with a charity helping people dying of cancer. And I said to them, look guys, you know, to be honest, I was really nervous when I started because I thought, well, these people are near the end of their lives. Will they want to hear my message on positivity? But I think it's important that we stick to what we believe is right. I have a passionate belief in the dignity of the individual. And these people were amazing. They all got really involved and they were remarkably generous and they used the principles. And I said, look, is there anything you would like me to share with people who I have the privilege of sharing my experiences with? And they all pretty much said the same 3 things. Number 1, don't do negativity. Forgive, move beyond it. Many felt their illness had been rooted in negative experiences in life. And secondly, they said, be thankful. We have so much we take for granted.
Yeah.
Love and give love and spread some sunshine. The last thing they said, be healthy. Look after your health while you have your health.
Chris, it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.